Dude. Okay. All right.
It's like Woodstock here. It's great.
Yeah, with all their clothes on, though.
Yeah.
They don't have their
The
clothes.
evening's young, Rob.
Okay.
What's happen?
Yeah, we're going to stir them up into a frenzy.
Rob, this is all for you.
That's what you
They
think.
all came here for you. So my first question is,
Why?
why? Okay. My first question was going to be, when did you meet me? But you killed it by saying why.
No, because, listen, the nicest thing about this for me is that I get to hang out with Alan, who I met 50 years ago. I was hosting the third episode of Saturday Night Live. The first episode was George Carlin, then Paul Simon, and then me. And Alan, who I think must have been 25 years old. How old were you at the time?
I was 25.
25. So if you do the math,
It works out beautifully.
he's like
Yeah.
70, he's 75 now. I'm a couple years older, 3 years old. And they assigned him to me for the opening monologue, to work together on the opening monologue. And I said, how come they gave me this Jew with a big head and we're gonna come up with something? And we became friends, and we've been friends since then. And,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
and his head is still very big.
You know, I know it's proportionately a little larger than
Yeah.
it should be, but you make like it affects the phases of the moon, okay?
Well.
It doesn't. All right, tides are not affected by it. I am thrilled to be here doing this. And, you know, it's, yes, you did host the third Saturday Night Live ever. And then I remember that following summer, Lorne produced a special about the Beach Boys. And we were at your house, and I was with Belushi and Aykroyd, who were in the special. And remember Paul Simon's song, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover? Okay? Go out the back, jacket on the bus, Gus, and all that. You, in your house, you were in the kitchen. You were preparing lunch for us.
Yeah.
And do you remember the song you were singing?
Yeah, 50 ways to eat chopped liver.
That's right.
Yeah. I do remember that.
Yeah, put it on some bread, Fred.
Put it on a crack, Jack. Put it on a schmear,
Yeah.
whatever.
And he got all the way to Z somehow.
Really? I didn't.
Yeah, I
got
don't know
that
what
far.
you did.
Yeah.
You did something. And then we've been friends ever since. And it's, when I first met you, when I was told to call you third show, I remember I was 25. And
When you remembered things.
when I remembered things.
Yeah.
When I was nervous calling you.
You were?
Yeah, I was.
Why?
I was nervous because All in the Family came on in 1971.
That's what I just came from doing Seth Meyers' show. And I'm going to ask, because I know this is obviously a very different audience. There was a very young audience there. And I asked them, because they said All in the Family, blah, 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 and blah, 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 like this. And then I said, okay, be honest. I want to know from everybody in this audience, how many people have never heard of All in the Family? And about half the audience applauded. So be honest. I don't expect too many applause. How many people never heard of All in the Family? All right, there's a couple. But but the point I was making, and I made that there, is that there was a time, this was the #1 show 5 years straight, every single week, #1. And wait, I'm not saying it to get applause. I'm going to make a point. That every week, we were a country of about 200 million at the time. Every week, 40 to 45 million people watched that show. And if you watched it, you had to watch it when it was on, because there was no DVR, no TiVo, no video cassettes. That meant 40 to 45 million people were having a shared experience and able to discuss what was going on in the world. And there was the liberal and the conservative, and we went at each other, and it was good, healthy discussion. Now, we're a country of about 340 million people, and if you can get 5 to 10 million people to watch a show at one time, that's a monster hit. And they don't always watch it at the same time. You go to dinner, tell me if I'm wrong. You go to dinner and you're sitting there and you say to somebody, have you seen the White Lotus? And they say, don't tell me, I'm only on episode 2. I saw the first season, but I didn't see the second. And you go on like that. You can't even talk about the thing you just saw. So to me, there's a big change in what's happening, and I think we're pushing ourselves, streaming and social media, we're pushing ourselves apart, even though we want to try to be, united. And I remember seeing, am I going on too long about this?
No. I forgot why I'm here.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No. It's about the book. It's about the book, by the way. This book, called A Fine Line Between Stupid and Clever, is my favorite line in the first Spinal Tap. And if you look at it, it's written by me, and then this was with Chris and Harry and Michael. And that's, it's just the history. It's the story of the making of Spinal Tap. But if you turn the book over, it's called Smell the Book, and that's the other side. And that's written by Marty DiBergi, which is the character I play. And I interview them in character, and it's a kind of oral history of the history of Spinal Tap. So that's why we're here. But what was I saying? Oh, yeah. What was I talking about?
Somebody order me a pizza. That would be great.
Yeah. My father, when he got to be about my age, he was a little older. He used to say, when he got in front of an audience, he said, I'm going to appoint somebody to be like the radar. When I get off subject, I'll point to you. You'll remember what I was talking about, and you'll bring me back. I didn't do that, though, so nobody knows what I was talking about.
Are people watching the same show?
Yes. No, they're not watching the same show at the same time, so we're all fractured. We're all fractured.
You're killing me.
At least he's paying attention, at least. Yeah.
When I met you.
Uh-oh. How old were you?
I think I was, now I'm 80, okay? Yeah. When I met you, it was not only was I meeting you, but I was just in awe of your dad. You told me the other day on the phone, you have a photograph in your office of your show of show writers.
Caesar's Hour, and it's a picture of all of the writers that worked on Sid Caesar's show. And I look at that picture, it's right in my office, I look at it all the time, and I think, anything that you laughed at in the second half of the 20th century was written by one of those people. Because there was Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, Neil Simon, my father, Larry Gelbart, who wrote MASH and Tootsie, Joe Stein, who wrote Fiddler on the Roof, and Aaron Rubin, who created the Andy Griffith Show and Gomer Pyle. It's astounding the talent that was in that show. I mean, it's just incredible. I have a lot to live up to.
Yeah. Well, I was going to go the other way with it because Albert Brooks was your best friend. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it would be hard for you not to be funny. It would seem in that atmosphere. And your mom.
My mom was
great
funny.
Singer, and she got a huge laugh in.
And when Harry Met Sally, she has that line, "I'll have what she's having," and yeah, and she. It's the funniest line of any movie I ever. And Billy Crystal wrote that line. Billy wrote that line, and we were rehearsing in L.A. And we had this really funny scene with Meg. You've seen where she's faking the orgasm and all that. And I called my mother up and I said, "Look, Mom, because I wanted, we were going to do it in the deli. We did it in Katz's Deli. And I said, we needed an older Jewish woman to have that line. And I thought my mother, she had done a little part in this movie that Anne Bancroft directed called Fatso. And I thought, she could do it, she could do it. So I called her up and I said, Mom, I got this thing, and it's one line. I said, we got a funny scene, I think, and your line has to be the topper. And if it's not the topper, then, I might have to cut it. She said, that's okay, I don't mind. I'll just come and they'll be with you for the day. I'll have a hot dog, it'll be fine. I said, okay. We start rehearsing the scene, and Meg, who does it unbelievably well, at first was very, very nervous, and she did it kind of tepid, she was weak, and she wouldn't do it full out. I mean, there's all these extras and the crew people, and she was nervous about it. She did it. I said, Meg, you gotta really go after it, otherwise it doesn't work. And then she did it again, it was weak, and I said, look, Meg, here's what I want. And I sat opposite Billy, and I'm pounding the table, yes, 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 like this. And I realized, I said, Billy, oh my God. He says, what? He says, I just had an orgasm in front of my mother. And I was a little nervous. He said it was like being on a date with, what did he say, Sebastian Cabot or somebody. See, you still got a laugh. That wouldn't get a laugh at Seth Meyers wouldn't get that one. Oh, he would get it, but the audience, yeah. I'm sorry, Alan. I'm sorry.
Anyone want to share a cab home? So now you've got a couple Emmys from All in the Family. Yeah. You've done a lot of TV at this point. At one point, you were like the designated hippie in a lot of TV shows.
Yes, I was the go-to hippie during the 60s, early 70s, actually early 70s. You can see me if you want. There's me on the Beverly Hillbillies, on Gomer Pyle. I'm always there. And as a matter of fact, we had a birthday party for my wife. Where's Michelle? Is Michelle around? Where are you, honey? In the back? You in the back? Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, there she is. Michelle was 40 years old, and we had a birthday party at our house, and the theme of the party was bad show business. And what that meant was everybody was to bring a tape or something of the worst thing they ever did, the most embarrassing thing, the thing that they were least proud of. And my contribution was me as a hippie singing "Blowing in the Wind" with Gomer, and in this thing. And so that was it. So I was always there. And so I was a hippie, yeah.
Before we get into Spinal Tap, that's why we're here, right?
Yeah, Spinal Tap.
Oh, the book, yes,
yeah.
Indeed.
Fine line between stupid and clever. Flip it over, smell the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Describe for a second the scene in the 70s when it came to comedy, because prior to that, it was a little tepid, all the variety shows and stuff, and then all of a sudden you had these improv groups like The Committee and The Credibility Gap and Second City, where Lorne got a lot of the people for the original SNL.
Right.
So that started happening. It was a different, and you were involved in that.
Right.
And what I was really curious about was the scene at Laurel Canyon.
Oh yeah, no, it was wild. I mean, it was wild because, there was two big explosions of music in the 60s. There was obviously the British invasion with the Beatles and the Stones, but then there was also this kind of West Coast, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Laurel Canyon, hippie kind of, rock that was folk rock, acid rock, and everybody lived in Laurel Canyon. I mean, there was Mama Cass, and there was, Neil Young and David Crosby, and we all hung out with each other. And Janis Joplin would come when I was performing with The Committee in San Francisco. She'd come to the stage and perform with us. So there was this real cross-pollination between the improv world and the music world. So when we went to do the first film, This Is Spinal Tap, it was natural for us. We lived in that world. And so it was natural to have the combination of music and in the fact that Michael, Chris, and Harry are all really accomplished musicians. They can all play. they're good musicians, and that were also improv actors. It was a perfect combination and a perfect way to blend. And if when you see the second one, and I hope you go to the theater to see it because it's meant to be in the theater. You know, you'll see it on streaming, whatever. But you know, Elton John talks about this in the second movie, and we have Elton John and Paul McCartney's in there and Garth Brooks. But Elton John talks about how when I asked him about Spinal Tap, I said, "You don't seem like you'd be." You know, a heavy metal fan, what? He says, no, these guys are real musicians. They can really play. He says, they're not like normal heavy metal guys. I mean, you don't find somebody who can play a mandolin in a heavy metal band. And Chris is a really good mandolin player. And they're very proud of the fact. They get so mad when people think that somebody's playing for them, like it's Milli Vanilli or you know, or one of those things. Because there's every note that they play live, never to a track, and they get so mad at me when I'm cutting the film together when they say, wait a minute, I'm not playing those notes. You're cutting to a section where I'm playing something else. We're very honest about cutting to them and making sure that they're playing what you actually see. So it was a great blend, though, of the rock world and the improv world.
Well, that's why I brought it up, because you've got three guys there, including yourself, who are great at improv. Now, you said that was your favorite line, was a fine line between stupid and clever.
Yeah.
I remember when I went to go see it for the first time, okay, when you were talking about the bad luck that we're having with drummers, okay?
Yeah, they've had some
One
real
guy,
bad string.
Yeah. From a very unfortunate gardening accident.
Yeah, well, he died in a bizarre gardening accident. You want to hear about something really crazy? We had a guy who, you know, choked. We had a guy who choked on vomit, but it wasn't his own vomit. But they couldn't prove whose vomit it was because they don't have the facility to dust for vomit. So that was the thing. And the bizarre gardening accident, one guy exploded on stage and spontaneously combusted, and they try to convince me that it's more common than you think. Yeah. But the bizarre gardening accident, we made a joke about it, and then years later, you know, from the guy from Toto, the drummer from Toto, Porcaro, he died in a bizarre gardening accident. He got some kind of bad pesticides or something. So it happens. And in the new movie, the last drummer they had is a guy named Skippy Scuffleton. And Skippy unfortunately passed away. He sneezed himself to death. He started sneezing and he couldn't stop, and that was it. So they need to find a new drummer, and they throw a wide net out, and we have an interview with Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Questlove, you know, from the Roots, and also Lars Ulrich from Metallica. And they interviewed them to see if they would sit in and become their drummer for their last concert, and they all turned them down because they don't want to die. You know, they just basically, it's too risky.
When I saw him say he choked on vomit, and it wasn't his vomit, I went, wow, I love this. See, that's my favorite.
And they improvise. It's all improvised.
It's all well,
the whole.
Well, the process is what fascinates me, because it's in the book that you do scenes 4 times and then you don't do it anymore because it would start to be stale. Is that correct?
What happened was I would do a scene once. I mean, and you know, you get certain laughs, and then I said, well, let's try it again. And you try it maybe 2 times or 3, but the second time and third time, they get other laughs, but they don't remember what they did the first time. So it's not like it matches or anything like that. You have to kind of cut the dialogue track. It's more important than cutting the visuals, because the visuals, you think the visuals are going to jar you, but they don't. What jars you is when the dialogue doesn't track and somebody says something weird. So we had to find the best of everything, stitch it all together. It's like writing with the pieces of film. And then I would tell the cameraman the first time, I say, let's do it one more time. And I say, just shoot people that are not talking. You know, so I have ways to get across. I mean, it's like reinventing the wheel. It's called coverage. You're cutting to reactions of things, and even if they're not exactly reacting to what you're hearing, it at least gives you a bridge to get from one thing to the next. But it's all completely improvised, and it was done that way because we wanted to make it look like a real documentary.
But you had an outline of sorts.
Yeah, we had an outline of like in the first one, the tour. This one, we had an outline of them not having played for 15 years, and maybe there was bad blood, they weren't speaking to each other, so we had the reunion when they first get together. We had all those things mapped out. I'm gonna tell you something funny about how we put both of these films together, because all the dialogue is improvised, but we try to map out at least a story and come up with ideas for scenes. And we did it the same way both times, both things. We had a bulletin board up, and we put cards. If we came up with a funny idea for a scene, we put it up on the bulletin board. Now, Harry Shearer, at the time we made the first one, was going with a woman who worked at ABC News. And when he was hanging out with her, he found, I don't know if you remember Roger Grimsby? You're right, he was a newscaster. Roger Grimsby there were a stack of cards with Roger Grimsby's face on it, and on the back was an empty, you know? And so if we came up with an idea that we thought was good, we'd say, does this deserve a Grimsby? Does this make it to the bulletin board? And if it deserved a Grimsby, we put it up there. The second movie we made, there were no more Grimsbys, but Michael McKean, he looked up on the internet and he found a picture of Roger Grimsby, and he had a bunch of Grimsby cards made up. So we went to do the same thing. I don't know if Roger Grimsby ever knew that we valued him so much.
What about Storm Field, the weatherman?
No, we didn't have
You left
any
him out. You
no
left him.
storms. We had no
storms.
storm field.
Now, what you call in the book schnadeling.
Schnadeling. Chris Guest came up with that term. And what it means is doing shtick. It's like when Alan and I, we first run into it, there's byplay. You're doing shtick with each other. And Chris Guest called it way back when. He says, you're schnadeling. You're schnadeling with each other. And so if you can find people that it's people you can hang with, people you like to hang with. I remember as a kid, I was like 16 years old, and my dad did the 2,000-Year-Old Man with Mel Brooks, and they're great comedy albums. If you haven't heard them, you should get them. They're
Best.
all-time classic comedy albums. Those were also improvised. And when I was 16, I used to come home and listen to the 2,000-Year-Old Man every day after school because I thought it was so brilliant. And I knew, and I'm sure you had the same feeling about it, you knew if somebody got that album or dug it, or you can quote lines from it.
It was a litmus test,
yeah,
wasn't it?
Knew, it's a litmus test. You knew you could hang with that person because they had the same sensibility. And that's the same thing when you meet people that you can schnadel with. Either you can or you can't. It's like good jazz musicians. You kind of just fall in with each other.
Schnadel sounds like something you put the chopped liver on and that other
Yeah,
thing. Okay.
50 ways to, yeah.
It's a schnadel. I remember we went to the movies once, you and me, my wife Robin, and Michelle. We went to see Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah, Jurassic
Right,
Park.
and a Tyrannosaurus Rex was running through a house. It went into the living room and the dining room,
kitchen,
and then it went into a room that had an oven and a microwave and a stove, and he leans over and says, "Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah, saw." It's just like a fountain, fountain. But let's go back to the beginning of the original Spinal Tap.
Here's a funny thing, because everybody says, well, you get your sense of humor from your dad, and that's to a large degree true. But my mother was really funny. My mother was really funny. She would, anytime they got together with Norman Lear and him and Mel, she would always have the line of the evening. And one time she went to see, I was friends with Richard Dreyfuss in high school, and we were close friends. He was in the improv group that I had when I was 19 at UCLA. And Richard was in a movie called Inserts. And the movie was about a down-on-his-luck wunderkind director like a Orson Welles who could never, couldn't get arrested. And he was now making these softcore porno movies. And my mother and father were sitting there watching this, and my mother turns to my father and says, "Carl, remind me to tell Robbie not to play with Ricky anymore." She was funny. She was really funny.
Okay, so now there's another story that I love, which is also sort of Spinal Tap, is because you became a director. This is later on. We'll go back to Spinal Tap. You had done Spinal Tap. You had done what was it? The Body.
Stand By Me.
Stand By Me. Okay, you did The Sure Thing. Okay, and maybe you had already done When Harry Met Sally. I don't know.
Princess Bride.
Princess Bride was in there.
Yeah.
So Rob is thrilled that finally he's an accomplished, respected director, and you finally have shed the whole meathead thing, right?
Yeah, right.
Right. What was that incident that happened? Was it Mexico?
I was in Mexico. I was in Mexico, and I got, the turista. I got the Aztec two-step or whatever they call it. I got the diarrhea. I was like, really, I ate something bad, and it was really terrible. And they were going to take me home, and I was so weak, I couldn't even walk. They had me in a wheelchair, and I'm being wheeled to the airport through the air, and somebody, Mexican guy looks at me and says, "Ho ho, cabeza de carne." Yeah. So, no.
Now, the road to get Spinal Tap made.
Yes.
I mean, it's gargantuan. First of all, the fact that you were going to direct it, all right, those were the days where somebody didn't cross over.
Yeah, no. In those days, you either were in television or in movies. Movies was like royalty. Television, we were the lowlifes, the peons. They looked down on us. And so to make the transition from a television actor into a director of movies, that was just not done. There was 1 year where we made the break, and it was me, it was Barry Levinson, Ron Howard,
Penny.
and Penny came along after, Jim Brooks, all had come from, Danny DeVito, another one, had come from television and started making movies. But before that, nobody. And so it took me years, 4 years after I finished All in the Family, I wanted to do this, and nobody would have it. And I went to this guy who was running a company called Marble Arch, which was owned by Sir Lou Grade. And this guy named Martin Starger, who used to run ABC, and I knew him a little bit from there. And I said, I had this idea for this, this film about a fictional band and a satire of heavy metal and documentaries. I said, look, maybe you'd want to make a deal. We'll write a screenplay for you. He gave us $60,000 to write the screenplay. We started to write the screenplay, and we realized there's no way we could communicate in screenplay form what this kind of loose documentary feel was going to be. So I went back to the guy, and I said, look, give me the $60,000, and I'll make you a little bit of the movie. And I put in $25,000, and I think the three guys chipped in $5,000. We had $90,000, and we made backstage footage, concert footage, interview footage. I put it all together, and I showed him this 20-minute reel, and he said, "This stinks. I don't like this." So now we run around trying to. I literally had a can of 16mm film under my arm. I went from studio to studio, and I told Karen Murphy, who was the producer, I said, if we ever get this made, we'll have that story where we went from studio to studio, we can't get it made. And nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted it. Finally, there was a movie they were making at a company called Avco Embassy. I think it was, who owned it first? I can't remember. But anyway, Avco Embassy, they were making some movie like Take This Job and Shove It, or some type of movie like that. They were looking for a director. And there was a guy named Peter Turner, who was an agent at William Morris. He wasn't my agent. I wasn't even with William Morris, but he had seen this 20-minute thing. He says to the woman who is in charge of this particular production, her name is Lindsay Duran, he says, "What about Rob Reiner?" And she said, "Rob Reiner, what has he ever directed?" He said, I saw this 20-minute thing. You should take a look. She looked at it and she said, well, forget this other movie, but what are you trying to do with this? And she got it. She got it right away. I said, I can't get anybody to finance it. Nobody wants it. She said, if I can convince the head of Avco Embassy, which was Frank Capra II, it was Frank Capra's son, was running Avco. He says, if I can get him to agree to distribute it, maybe that'll help you find some financing. I said, God, that'd be great. They did agree to distribute it. I went and found some financing, like $1 million or something. I went back and I said, okay, we got some money and you're going to distribute. And then Jerry Perenchio and Norman Lear bought Avco Embassy. And what happens, and even though I had a relationship with Norman, what they do is they scrap everything that's under development. They want to start with a new slate. And one of the things was my thing. And so they said, that's it, we're not doing it. I go to Alan Horn, who was running the company, and Alan I knew from the All in the Family Day. I said, Alan, please, let me talk to Norman and Jerry and let me at least explain what this is and maybe they'll give me a shot. So they put together a meeting with Jerry and Alan and Norman and a couple of other executives, and I go crazy in the meeting. I said, it's the greatest movie. It's fabulous. It's rock and roll. The kids will love it. Repeat business. I'm going crazy like this. And if I finally leave the meeting, and what I hear happened after I left is Norman turns to Jerry and Alan Horn and says, which one of you two is going to tell him he can't do this? And that's how we got it done. Yeah. And that story's in here. It's in the book.
All these stories are in here. Plus, what you'll find with this book, which is terrific, you will be turning it like this a lot.
No, you read the one half, and then when you finish it, you flip it over and read the other half. You were doing that the whole time? No wonder you didn't understand the book.
It's obvious there's still much I could learn from you. Now, Spinal Tap, before you came up with the name.
Yeah.
Well, the first name was the Originals, right?
Well, the band was called the Originals, but then they found out that there was another band called the Originals. So then they became the Thamesmen, and then they found out that the Originals broke up, and so they were going to be the new Originals. They could become the Originals again, but they just keep changing their names, and finally wound up with Spinal Tap, which the first big hit they had was Listen to the Flower People. That was their first really big hit.
What's amazing about it's a whole phenomenon. What started off as a parody, right, of the genre. It was The Last Waltz was out. Even your name, Marty DiBergi.
Yes.
Okay, tell us.
Okay, well, I looked at, I studied all the rock and roll documentaries at the time. There was The Song Remains the Same, which is about Led Zeppelin, and there was The Kids Are All Right, which was The Who, and back to, the Bob Dylan Penny Baker documentary called Don't Look Back. And then there was The Last Waltz, and I looked at this, and it's about, it's Martin Scorsese doing about the last concert of the band. And I thought, wait a minute, he's in the movie. I said, I never saw a documentarian put themselves in the movie. He's in the movie, he's asking the band, Robbie Robertson, all these questions. I said, wait a minute, I could be in the movie. I could be the guy that asked the questions. And so I put myself in the movie. And when Marty first saw it, he said, that's not nice. You're making fun of me. You're making fun of me. What's this card? What is this? You had a question on here. What does it say? I don't know. But then now Marty loves it. He thinks it's great, and he's happy that
the DiBergi part was also an amalgam.
Yeah, DiBergi is the D is from Vittorio De Sica, Berg is Ingmar Bergman, and the E is Fellini. So I try to make Marty into thinking that he was like a big time, But his real name is not Marty DiBergi. He's half Jewish and half Italian. That's true, but he's not DiBergi. He made that up.
What is stunning about the whole thing is it started off as this parody of the genre. Okay, it was all tongue-in-cheek. There were people who thought it was real. You
Yes,
went on the
they
Joe
did.
Franklin show, right?
They did think it was real.
Remember Joe Franklin?
Yeah. The first time we screened this picture in Dallas, the people, first of all, you know, people, they write cards to tell you what they think of the movie, you know. The worst cards ever. It's just, I never seen anybody. The people came up to me afterwards and said, I don't understand. Why would you make a movie about a band nobody's ever heard of? Make a movie about the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. Don't do this. I said, no, it's a satire. And I felt bad, but then I read these cards and I felt a little bit better. And the reason I felt better is because I counted amongst all these cards 5 different ways that you can spell the word movie. There was M-O-V-I-E, there was M-O-V-E-Y, there was M-O-V-Y, there was M-O-V-E-E, and my favorite one, M-O-V-E. Move. And so I said, well, maybe I'm not dealing with geniuses here.
So it starts off like that, it gets some traction, and it grows to the point where this was on your Break Like the Wind tour. Okay?
Yes.
Albert Hall, Wembley Stadium, and Glastonbury, right?
Yes, and they played, as Harry says, we also played Carnegie fucking Hall, you know. So they played there too. They played in real venues. I mean, they became a real band. They played in all these places around the world, and musicians loved to play with them. And it took on this weird kind of, you know, first we created this kind of parallel universe that they existed in. We didn't really mention other rock bands and stuff, but then it kind of creeped its way into the real world. Real musicians would see it and they'd get upset. I mean, Steven Tyler and from Aerosmith and Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses and even Ozzy Osbourne, they said, that's not very nice. You know, you're making fun of us. You know, we're doing important work. You know, they thought of themselves as much loftier than what. And we were trying. Listen, we were the first generation to grow up on rock and roll. I'm a child of the 50s and 60s. We love rock and roll, but we also see how silly it is at times. So we try to marry the two, find the silliness, and also have a love for it. But people didn't get it right away. It took a long time before people caught on to it.
But then it got to a point where it was started to be taken seriously.
Yes.
They started getting groupies,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, this was a parody band.
They had groupies, and I don't know if you saw the first one. There's a scene where Derek is going through the metal detector, and he's got his pants stuffed with. He claims it's not a cucumber. It's a courgette. It's a zucchini, and it sets off the metal detector. And so when they used to play concerts, people would throw zucchinis on the stage and stuff, and they make the joke now, and girls would throw their panties. Says now that they're older, the panties have gotten a lot bigger. They throw them out, you know. But no, they had groupies and everything.
And your songs like Big Bottom.
Well, yeah, Big Bottom.
Yeah. Lick My Love Pump.
Yeah, that one got me. That one got me because I didn't know Chris was gonna. I walk up to him and I see he's playing the piano. He's just noodling around, and it's playing this kind of classical little thing. And I just say, this is beautiful. It's a departure from the kind of thing you normally. He says, well, I love Mozart and Bach. It's kind of a mock piece. And he says it's in D minor, the saddest of all keys. And I said, well, what do you call this one? He says, Lick My Love Pump. And I went. We had to do that one over. We had to do that one.
Can you explain to these nice people what grapes of Heine?
Grapes of Heine. Okay. Grapes of Heine. Now, you know that they have a scene in the first one where Nigel is complaining about the accommodations backstage because they have these big pieces of cold cuts and the bread is too small and it doesn't fit. And that came out of an article we read in Rolling Stone called The Endless Party. It was all about Van Halen and the fact that they didn't like brown M&Ms and they had to take all the brown M&Ms out and the whole thing. So we made a scene about that. And this actually happened to the guys. They were on tour and Michael was getting dressed for the show and he was wearing just a jock strap. That's all he had on. And so, you know, jock strap, you know, you're bare and the bottom is... And Chris had these grapes, and he says, here, bend over. He threw a grape at him. I was going to hit him. It went and stuck right in the thing. And what's the odds of doing that? And that became the grapes of Heine. Oh, boy. That's him. Oh, Jesus.
You're shocked that I picked that out of there, huh?
Grapes of Heine.
Grapes of Heine. Once again, it becomes part of the culture,
Yeah.
okay? The avant-garde became the garde. You're part of the culture.
Yeah.
National Film Registry, okay? You're in there with Casablanca, Godfather.
Yeah. Well,
Grapes of Wrath.
I think
Grapes
we're
of Heine.
crazy. Yeah. And I'll put money down that ours is funnier than any of those movies. You know, I mean, there's some laughs in The Godfather, but, you know, come on. No, I mean, we're in there. And then, you know, the Goes to 11, which is a thing
Right.
here. Yeah. Yeah. This is in the Oxford English Dictionary, that saying. And it's not just referring to, you know, music that's too loud. It's referring to anything in excess. So, you know, when you're in the Oxford English, you're really part of the lexicon. You become, yeah.
Okay, so this is questions from the audience.
Okay.
Okay?
Where's the audience? Oh, there they are.
These folks out here.
Yeah, I know them.
Okay, the first one is, what did your father think of Spinal Tap? Did he give you any advice? And this was from Peggy and Ed.
Okay. Peggy and Ed. Well, he loved Spinal Tap, by the way. No advice. I mean, the only advice I ever got from my father was watching how he conducted his life. That's the best advice I ever got. He didn't sit me down and say, son, try this, try that. We never talked about anything show business. It was just the way I saw how he handled himself with people and with the work and with the actors and all that. But I got to say, the thing that I'm so proud of, and he lives with me every day. I mean, I'm the luckiest guy in the world because, you know, you're lucky if you have a mentor, you know, but I have had two. You know, my father, obviously, and then Norman Lear. And when my father, in 1984, when the film came out, he had a film out with Steve Martin called All of Me. And it was a great movie. And they, you know, they have these lists at the end of the year, you know, top 10, the 10 best movies. And This Is Spinal Tap and All of Me were on tons and tons of lists together. And I thought, wow, when has that ever happened? Where a father and a son both directed movies in the same year that would be considered top 10. And so, you know, we're together. I mean, always. He's always in my mind. I think about him all the time. Our stars are next to each other on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And you know, a year or so before he died, they had a ceremony at the Grauman's Chinese, you know, where you put your hands and your feet in the cement. And the two of us did it together. And I suggest that we put our bald heads in there, but they didn't want that. But you know, I'm always, he's always with me, and I always think, you know, of my dad whenever I do anything.
You know, all of us who went into this business to write comedy grew up on the Dick Van Dyke Show, which was your dad's show. right? Bonnie Meadow Road in
Right.
New Rochelle.
Bonnie Meadow Road, which we lived at 48 Bonnie Meadow Road. And in the Van Dyke, it was 148 Bonnie Meadow Road. And that road is now called Dick Van Dyke Lane. They changed the name just because of that.
Now, was there a story about you visiting the set of Dick Van Dyke? You were about 15 years old, and
Oh, yeah, I was 14.
14.
I was 14 years old, and this is, I'm not telling tales out of school because Mary Tyler Moore wrote about this in her book and also told a story on Letterman, on Dave Letterman show. And when I was 14 years old, I was like in love with Mary Tyler Moore. I mean, and my hormones were raging like crazy, and she wore those capri pants, and I was like, oh my God. And I don't know what possessed me. It must have been the Dybbuk was in me or the devil, whatever. But I just looked at her and I just touched her tushy, you know? And she was like this. And then I'm called into my father's office and he says to me, did you grab Mary Tyler Moore by the tush? And I said, yeah. He said, don't ever do that again. He had a little smile on his face. I think he wished he could have done. Anyway, Mary Tyler Moore was so good on the show. She always, whenever she was get upset, she would go, oh, Rob. That was her signature thing. Oh, Rob. She would always go. And the Rob character was named after me. And so now it's years later. They're doing a reunion show of Van Dyke. And by now I've directed, I've been on All in the Family, directed a bunch of movies. And I come to the studio where they're doing it, and they're just finishing a scene. And Dick is in a tuxedo, and Mary is in a beautiful evening gown, and they just finished some scene. And before they cut, I said to the camera, I said, just keep rolling, keep rolling. And I walk out, and I say to Mary, I said, Mary, I just want to apologize. After all these years, I feel so bad about what I did. I mean, I was wrong. And, you were just so beautiful. And I said, not that you're not, you're gorgeous now. I mean, if I wouldn't get in trouble for sexual harassment, I would. She bends over with her tush. I grab her tush and she goes, oh, Rob. Great payoff. Great payoff. It took a 20-year setup to get to that. Yeah.
If Spinal Tap could sing one song by Cher,
By Cher?
yeah, what would it be?
Well, Cher does sing a song on one of their albums. It's called Begin Again. And, you can hear it. I mean, she actually sings a song with them.
How do you so expertly balance comedy, heart, honesty in your work?
That's a good question because it's important for me to have that happen. I remember when I was 17 years old and I was an apprentice at the Bucks County Playhouse. And I was, it was a great venue. And, I was an apprentice. I was building sets and painting scenery. I wasn't acting at the time. And they had a play called 1,000 Clowns. It was one of the first plays they had there. And I thought, wow, it's a very funny play, but a very serious subject. And look how they did that. I said, if ever I get to do something, I want to do that. I want to be able to marry those two things if it's possible. So it was always something in my head. Now, when you're doing a satire, it's like emotion and satire are like enemies. They don't want to hang out with each other. It's like oil and water. But I always felt that if I was going to do this, it couldn't just be a straight satire, and that's all it is, just making fun. There had to be some emotional undercurrent, even if it's a small amount. And, I took from the relationship in the movie that Nigel and David had. They knew each other from the time they were little boys, and they're best friends, and they're like brothers. And whenever there's conflict, it happens between the two of them. And so that was the basis for getting some emotion into the first. And the second one, what I discovered is that they're older, and whatever their conflicts are, they get deeper, a little bit deeper, because you live more life. And so there's a little bit more emotion, not much more, but a little bit more. No, and I try to balance that. And when I did Stand By Me, that was the first time I was able to take humor. There's a lot of humor in it. There's also melancholy and nostalgia, and I blend all those things together because that was a real extension of the way I think. To me, theater is great when you can laugh and also feel something. I mean, that to me is like a full meal. You know, you're getting everything. So I always try to find ways to do that if I can blend them.
With Stand By Me, which was based on Stephen King's short story, The Body.
The Body,
right?
yeah.
When he saw the movie, did he compliment you?
Yeah, it was interesting because we screened it for him. It was just me and the writers and Andy Scheinman, and just in one room. After he watches it, and it's very autobiographical, he actually had 4 friends. In the real story, all 3 of his friends died. We just had the one, but all 3 of his friends died in early on because they were, there were drug problems, all kinds of things. But he watches this movie, and after he finishes it, he says, I just want to go and think for a second. I thought, oh my God, what if he doesn't like it? He came back, and he said, this is the best adaptation of anything I've ever written. That's not saying much, but he because he didn't like a lot of things, but he did love that. And then he said something that was really cool, because in the book, Gordy is kind of an observer. He's just one of the 4 guys. I decided to make Gordy the main character for it to be about Gordy and why it was so important that he sees this dead body, that he's driven to see the dead body because at his brother's funeral, he has this dream that his father loved his brother more and says, it should have been you, Gordy. And he never cried at his brother's funeral. So when we get to that point where they're at the body and they see the body for the first time and they're sitting on this log, and I wrote this scene. I was up in Eugene, Oregon by myself in a hotel room, and I'm writing this scene, and I'm crying. I'm crying as I'm writing it because Gordy is saying, my father didn't love me. He didn't love me. And Chris Chambers, played by River Phoenix, says, no, he loved you. He just didn't know you. And that's the way I felt when I was young, growing up, that my father loved me, but he just didn't get me because I was not like the Schneidlers that he hung around with. And so that scene meant so much to me. And then, if you remember, the older boys arrive, if you've seen the movie, and Kiefer Sutherland is ready to pull a knife, and then Gordy pulls the gun, and he says, suck my fat one, you cheap dime store. He goes at him, and Stephen King says to me, once in a while, I'll see a movie of something that I've written, and I'll say, why didn't I think of that? I should have had, because in the book, Chris Chambers picks up the gun. And I had Gordy pick up the gun because it was a coming of age, really more for Gordy. And he said, I should have had Gordy do it. What you did was the right thing. It was like, I got Marshall McLuhan right here, I love that they knew that reference. That's good.
All right, here's our last question.
Yeah.
And this is a question that a lot of people are asking, okay? Will comedy be able to get back to focusing on just what is funny without worrying about who may be offended?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We're talking about PC and woke culture and all that stuff. Yes, I think we will. But you have to be very deft. I don't know if you watch Ricky Gervais at all, but he has a way of framing things where he'll say, no, you're not supposed to say, this is a bad thing, you're not supposed to say. Like, for instance, if I said, and then he says it, and he slips it in a way that makes it kind of work. But I think you have to be able to make fun of everything. Otherwise, a comedian can't do what he does.
I agree. And that culture is built on satire. You look at Python, always punching up at the church, at the Queen, or whatever, and this is what we always do.
Yeah.
Okay, and we got to get back to it. I think we're done.
We are?
Okay,
Oh, it was
thank
fun.
you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks.
Okay, good, buddy.
Yeah. We got a few laughs.
This was fun, right?
Thank you. That's very nice of you. Thank you.